Hello and welcome to the Youth Key Action 2 Strategic Partnerships Startup video. The aim of today is to provide you with the information you need to manage your project effectively. We will be covering information about your grant agreement, payments and budget structures. Also, we'll be looking at reporting requirements and impact and dissemination. On the screen, you can see all of the different budget categories associated with Key Action 2 funding. You can see the breakdown of what the different budget categories can be used for. There are two types of costs in your budget, unit costs and real costs. Unit costs are awarded based on fixed rates. If you remember back to the application form, travel was claimed according to distance bands and set rates. This means if the activity takes place and the person travels, your project will be entitled to the full fixed rate. Actual costs work slightly different. They are based on a principle of real costs and we will only fund your actual expenditure. If you've been awarded special needs or exceptional costs, please remember that we will only pay according to receipted expenditure. Therefore, you will be required to keep receipts and invoices. Now we're going to look at your grant agreement and the contractual rules. The first thing I should mention is that you should have now all received your grant agreement via email. Most of you now will have been issued with your grant agreement. All grant agreements will have the following common structure. Part 1 is your special conditions, which is your grant agreement, and these are tailored to your project. For example, your awarded budget, your bank details, and your partners. Part 2 is the general conditions, and this is more generic and common across all fields, and it can be found on our website. And the annexes form an integral part of the grant agreement, and we will talk about the annexes on the next slide. So you should have received the following annexes with your grant agreement. Annex 1, which is the general conditions. Annex 2, this is important as it contains information about your estimated budget. And Annex 3 is the financial and contractual rules, and this contains clarification on the use of the grant under the different budget categories. It is very important that you read that annex. Annex 4 also details the unit costs and applicable rates that apply to your project. You will have also received a bank details form, and you would need to return this along with 2 copies of your grant agreement. Part 2, the general conditions of your grant agreement, can be found under the general conditions section of our website. You can see a link on the slide here. Next, we'll begin by looking at the special conditions of your grant agreement. So Article 1.2, this is the article that details your project start and end dates, and you'll need to ensure that all activities take place within these dates. The grant agreement is a legal document between the UK National Agency and your organisation. It is a contract and becomes valid once it is countersigned by ourselves. Any project activities that take place out of the project start and end dates will be deemed ineligible and will not be funded. There are 2 types of costs in your budget. These are unit costs and actual costs, and you can see on screen how they are separated out within the budget. Unit costs are based on flat rates, and this is provided that a triggering event happens and supporting documentation is retained as evidence. Real costs are based on actual expenditure, and you will get 100% of special needs support and 75% of eligible costs under exceptional costs. Receipts and invoices are required as evidence for the real cost expenditure. This article details the maximum amount of grant. We cannot increase grants retrospectively. It is important to be aware that you are not automatically entitled to the full grant amount. You have been awarded your grant based on activities being carried out as applied for in the application form. If these activities do not take place, the costs associated with these activities will be removed from the total budget. We would also suggest that if there are any changes within your project, you notify us as soon as possible. Article 1.3.3 contains information about budget transfers. If you are considering transferring between budget categories, please contact us before you do so. As per Article 1.4, Reporting and Payment Arrangement, all grants are paid in euros. You will receive your first pre-financing payment within 30 days of the UK National Agency countersigning your grant agreement. Your final report is seen as a request for the payment of the balance of your grant. It must be submitted within 60 calendar days after the end date of your project. Your final payment will be processed once your final report has been submitted and assessed by external assessors. All reporting takes place on Mobility Tool Plus. You will receive your final payment 60 days after the receipt of your final report. If the report or project does not meet assessed standards, the final payment could be reduced or withdrawn. Due to GDPR changes, there is a new clause in the grant agreement that states the division of roles, as you can see on screen now. On screen now are our contact details, and any queries that you have regarding your Key Action 2 project should be directed to the email address as shown on screen. All reporting takes place on Mobility Tool Plus, and you'll need to ensure that it's updated on a regular basis, and please ensure that you record everything that has taken place within your project. As a recipient of European Union funding, you are required to acknowledge the contribution of EU programme funding on your website or on any materials that are produced by the project. The logo on screen now should be used, and you can find it on our website. Next, we're going to look at Part 2 of the Grant Agreement, the General Conditions. Any changes or amendments to your project and grant agreement must be made in writing to the UK National Agency within a minimum of 30 days. If you are aware of any project changes at any time throughout your project, please ensure that these requests are sent to us and are justified and are also provided well in advance of any changes. There are numerous changes which your organisation may wish to make to your project. You can see a list of them on screen here. Please note that you would need to contact us in the first instance before making any changes to your project. Article 2.19 contains information about eligible costs for unit costs and actual costs. The full criteria for eligible costs is outlined here. All costs incurred in activities must take place within the project start and end dates as per your grant agreement. Any activity that falls outside of your overall project dates will be deemed ineligible, and you won't be able to claim the costs for these activities. On screen now is an example of costs which are considered ineligible. There are additional examples in this annex, and we would recommend that you check it carefully. Article 2.27 contains information about checks and audits. Your project is subject to an audit from the point of signature of the grant agreement up until 5 years following the date of the final payment. Audits can be carried out by the UK National Agency, European Commission and other Commission-mandated bodies. As a result, It is important that you keep all original documents of expenditure, e.g. travel tickets and any invoices, throughout the course of the project. If your grant amount is more than €60,000, you will be required to keep all original documentation for 5 years. If the grant award is less than €60,000, documents will need to be kept for a maximum of 3 years. Next, we're going to look at Annex 3, which is the financial and contractual rules of your grant agreement. For each budget category, your grant agreement details the calculation of that grant amount, the triggering event, the supporting documentation, and any reporting requirements. Project management and implementation, proof of activities undertaken and outputs produced will be provided in the form of a description of these activities and the outputs in the final report. You must also ensure that outputs are uploaded onto the Erasmus Plus project results platform. In regards to reporting, on behalf of the project as a whole, the coordinating organisation must report on the final distribution of funds and on undertaken activities and results. For transnational project meetings, you will be required to keep proof of attendance in the form of an attendance list specifying the name of the participant, the purpose of the activity, as well as the start and end date. You will also need to provide proof of attendance in the form of a participants list that should be signed by the participants and the receiving organisation. You will also be required to provide a detailed agenda and any documents used or distributed at the transnational project meeting. For intellectual outputs, you must upload these onto the Erasmus Plus project results platform, and you must also provide proof of the staff time invested in the intellectual outputs in the form of a timesheet per person, identifying the name, the category of staff time, and the total number of days of work the person has carried out on the intellectual output. Proof of the nature of the relationship between the person and the beneficiary must be provided, and a formal link must be shown as to how they are involved within the project. For multiplier events, you will also be required to provide a proof of attendance in the form of a participants list, and this must be signed by the participants and the receiving organisation, and it should specify the date and the place of the multiplier event. For learning, teaching and training activities for travel, this contributes to the travel costs of participants, including accompanied persons, from the place of origin to the venue of activity. Travel distances must be calculated using the distance band calculator, which is supported by the European Commission, and travel must be 10 kilometres or more in order to be eligible for funding. For individual support, the unit cost per day covers subsistence of participants, including accompanying persons during the activity. If approved at application stage, the beneficiary may add 1 day for travel directly before the first day of the activity abroad, and 1 day after the last day of activity. These extra days will be considered for the calculation of individual support. For travel and individual support, you must provide receipts and boarding cards for the travel, and you must also keep an attendance list which specifies the names of the participants and the purpose of the activity. For actual costs, so this is special needs and exceptional costs, these costs must be incurred within the project start and end dates. Costs must be identifiable and verifiable, and you must make sure that you keep invoices for these costs, as they will be required at final report stage. Special needs support is for additional costs directly related to participants with disabilities. This may include costs related to travel and subsistence if justified. Details of what you've been funded for can be found in Annex 2 of the grant agreement. Exceptional costs need to be pre-approved at application stage, and there are contributions to real costs related to subcontracting or purchase of goods and services. The supporting documentation you need to keep for exceptional costs would be invoices, and these would need to specify the name and address of the body issuing the invoice, the amount, the currency, and also the date. Poor, partial, or late implementation of the project may be established by the NA on the basis of the final report being submitted by the beneficiary and the projects and outputs that have been produced by the project. Next, we're going to look at monitoring and compliance in your project. There are several different types of checks that can be carried out during the project. So you can have a final report check, and this applies to the final report and is assessed by us as a national agency. Secondly, there are desk checks which apply to a very small sample of beneficiaries, and these take place at the UK National Agency. If you are selected for a desk check, you will be asked to send in all original documents. We check them and return them to you along with a report back to your organisation. On-the-spot checks, which could happen during the implementation of your project, only happen to, again, a small sample of beneficiaries. And these two checks take place at your organisation, where a member of the team will visit and review your project and documentation. Audit visits, which could happen to an even smaller sample of beneficiaries, are performed by European bodies, and details of these can be found in Article 2.27. As a beneficiary, you do have a duty to keep all documents, and you must ensure that they are stored in the appropriate way, and also they are digitalised originals. Beneficiaries need to keep documents for 5 years if their grant is more than €60,000, and for 3 years if the grant amount is no more than €60,000. Desk checks happen to a small sample of beneficiaries. You will be selected at random, and you will be requested to provide supporting documentation to prove eligibility of costs claimed in the final report. And also you will be asked to provide supporting documentation that you would have uploaded to Mobility Tool as part of your final report. The UK National Agency may visit your organisation during the lifetime of your project. The main aim of a monitoring visit is to support, counsel and advise beneficiaries during your project. It's also a chance to take stock of the project and its objectives so far, and review your progress against the objectives that were set out in your initial application form. The UK National Agency can use this opportunity to gain a greater understanding of your project and review whether your project is meeting the needs of other stakeholders and participants. You can also use this opportunity to seek clarification and guidance on any aspect of your project. An on-the-spot check usually takes place in conjunction with the monitoring visit, and this will be a random sample of projects. And there are 4 areas which an on-the-spot check looks to investigate. That's the eligibility of your participants, the coherence of participants with application, the eligibility of activities, and the quality of mobility activities. Audit visits may be undertaken by the European Commission and other European bodies. And we will be informed about the check before, but we do not have access to the selection list. Conflict of interest. The beneficiary shall take all necessary measures to prevent any situation where the impartial and objective implementation of the agreement is compromised for reasons involving economic interest, political or national affinity, family or emotional ties, or any other shared interests. You must inform us if there is a conflict of interest as soon as possible. Next, we're going to look at supporting participants. The beneficiary must have in place effective procedures and arrangements to provide for the safety and protection of their participants during the lifetime of their project. You must ensure that the appropriate insurance coverage is provided to all participants that are involved in mobility activities. You should also ensure that you take all necessary measures to comply with the requirements of the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, which relates to health and safety and may apply to the performance of your agreement. Protection of children and vulnerable adults. I would recommend consulting this article in your grant agreement carefully and consider how you will safeguard children and vulnerable adults both in local and transnational project activities, including virtual and/or online project activities. And please ensure that you sign the Declaration for Child Protection. Next, we're going to look at reporting. So you will be required to carry out all your reporting on Mobility Tool Plus. This is the online system for management of mobility projects that receive an EU grant under the Lifelong Learning and Erasmus Plus programmes, and it is used to provide information about your projects and also to identify participants and mobilities. You will be able to access the Mobility Tool Plus through your EU login. If you haven't already created one, you can do so on the link shown on the screen. Only the official contact and legal representative of the project will receive an email when your project has been added to the Mobility Tool Plus. You will also receive an email from Mobility Tool Plus and will need to log in the link shown on screen. After you log in, you will be shown a screen which looks like this. All of your organisation's details will be pre-filled. The main thing that you need to check here is that all the details are correct, and if anything is incorrect, please let us know as soon as possible. You will all be required to submit a final report, and this needs to be submitted within 60 days after the project end date. The reporting deadlines are agreed upon by signing the grant agreement, and the report will cover qualitative and financial information for the duration of your project. And again, this can be accessed via Mobility Tool Plus. Your products and outputs will be assessed by the national agency using a common set of quality criteria which focuses on the extent to which the project was implemented in line with the approved grant application, the quality of the activities that have been undertaken, and the quality of the products and outputs produced, and also the learning outcomes and the impact on participants. In regards to final reporting quality, you must ensure that the report is not copy and pasted from text that is presented in the application form. You will be required to highlight all the benefits the activities had on the partnership as a whole. We want you to show off what you have done, so please ensure that you include the relevant detail for the final report. Please also make sure you're clear about who the policy or decision makers or experts involved were and the extent of their involvement. The impact section of your report should clearly state the results and outcomes directly delivered by and resulting from the implementation of the project. This could include how youth policies were shaped or formed by the input of the young participants. Next, we're going to look at impact and dissemination. Here you can see the Impact Plus tool, which you can find on our website. The Impact Plus exercise taken from the website offers a visual aid to think about some of the groups that you could consider when thinking about the impact of your project. These could include the participants themselves, the project staff and what they have gained, the partner organisations, and what benefits the project will deliver to your field. Now we're going to look at how to share your success and disseminate your project results. The first place you are able to share your success is in-house and at your organisation. You can share best practice with other members of staff and also share any knowledge and experience. On the screen is a list of examples of how you can share your experiences. You can also use success indicators such as facts and figures, numbers of meetings, the numbers of participants, and also the visibility in social media. The results of the project may be of a diverse nature and consist of both concrete, which are tangible results, as well as skills and personal experiences, which would be classed as intangible results. In order to disseminate more widely, you could use experiences, strategies, and processes, and it's also recommended that you document them. And you could also use interviews, questionnaires, tests, observations, or self-assessment mechanisms to record this type of result. So you can increase your impact in-house by sharing knowledge and experience upskilling other staff and departments, and also continuing project activity after funding has finished. It's really important you disseminate your results outside of your organisation. This gives you an opportunity to promote your organisation and project results so other people can benefit from them in the future. Here you can see that there are many places where you can have an impact, and please make sure you are noting these as you go through the project. Next, we're going to look at how to celebrate the success of your project. Most important thing to remember is to make sure you disseminate effectively and have a plan. The 6 questions to remember are why, what, how, when, whom, and where. You should also refer to your dissemination plan, which you would have created in your application, and also relate this to the impact of your project and deliverables. So during the project, you need to make sure that you are updating the project results platform on a regular basis if you do have different outputs during the project. You also can continue to contact relevant media, inform people via newsletters, articles, reports. After the project, you will also need to upload any further outputs to the project results platform. And we do have the ability to share case studies. So if you're interested in sharing a case study, I would suggest getting in contact with us. We want you to ensure that you are sharing your success and spreading the word of Erasmus+, and it's important to make sure you reach as many people as possible. We would recommend using the Erasmus+ logo. Be proud to have received funding and have this opportunity, and also this will need to be put onto any documents that you produce during the lifetime of your project. We would suggest possibly having a monthly newsletter to talk about the success of your project. You could use social media to promote your project results and to make sure that you keep any social media up to date with all the activities that you're doing within the project. In order to demonstrate your project's impact, you will also have to demonstrate the actions you've taken and the effect that they've had in your final report. We would suggest giving as much information as possible and using as much detail, and make sure you use measurable data such as using surveys, questionnaires, and also links to websites where you've promoted your project. Remember that you need to ensure that you read your grant agreement and annexes carefully. Make sure you involve other members of staff in the project management and application. Make sure you keep everything and record everything. Please ensure that you respect the deadlines and make sure you submit your final report on time. Please ensure you're complying with your grant agreement annexes and programme guide, and also have measures in place to ensure your project and the relationship with your partners is successful. The NA can help you showcase your project. We can feature case studies on our website, and also we accept videos, photos and stories, and we can upload these onto our website and help you promote your project. If you would like to write a case study to share the story of your Erasmus Plus project and experience, then you can find a link to our case study pro forma on the slide now. I would highly recommend signing up to our Erasmus Plus newsletter, as you will be able to keep up to date with any information that we send out via this newsletter and is relevant to your sector. On this slide you can find our help desk, which is open Monday to Friday 8:30 till 5:30, and you can see our 2 email addresses on the website. If you do have any queries during the lifetime of your project, please don't hesitate to contact us. You will also be able to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and you can also view our YouTube channel.